4 years, 1,461 days. No Father's Day text, no call on my birthday, not even a message when I had my knee replaced and had to ask my neighbor to drive me home from the surgery center because there was nobody else. I'd made peace with the silence the way you make peace with a bad knee. You stop waiting for it to feel normal, and you just learn to walk differently. Then my phone buzzed on a Thursday night in March, sitting on my kitchen counter at 9:22 p.m., next to a mug of decaf I'd already stopped paying attention to, and every wall I'd quietly built came down in about the time it takes to read 11 words. I didn't have the number saved anymore. I knew it anyway. You don't forget your own daughter's number, not even after 4 years of nothing. My hands were steadier than I expected when I picked up the phone. That surprised me. I'd imagined this moment 100 different times, the call, the voicemail, whatever shape it finally took. And in every version I'd ever pictured, I was a mess. I wasn't. I was something worse than nervous. I was hopeful. The text read, "Dad, saw your Instagram. We should get together. I made a reservation at the Meridian on Saturday at 7. There's something I want to discuss with you, and I'll need you to bring a cashier's check for $90,000. I'll explain everything at dinner." I read it 4 times, standing right there at the counter. No, I've missed you. No, how have you been? No acknowledgement of 4 years of nothing, just a restaurant name, a time, and a dollar amount. I walked to my kitchen table in Plano and sat down, the same table where I'd helped my daughter with her algebra homework in 8th grade. The same table where she'd cried the night before her college move-in because she was scared and wouldn't say so. I sat there for a long time with my phone face down in front of me, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with what I'd just read. Welcome to Dad's Real Revenge. Make yourself at home. Hit the like button when we're through, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. This one's going to take you somewhere. But I need to back up first, because none of this makes sense without the full picture. My daughter and I had been close once, genuinely close, the kind of close that doesn't need constant phone calls because you both just know it's there. She was my only child. Her mother, Glenna, and I split up when my daughter was 19. The divorce was civil enough on paper. Under the surface, it was something else. Glenna got the house in Frisco, half my retirement accounts, and something I didn't realize she was also taking at the time, my daughter's trust in me, gradually, carefully, over the next 3 years. It wasn't dramatic at first, it was slow. Holiday plans that changed at the last minute for reasons that didn't quite add up. My daughter calling me less and less, and when she did call, there were new phrases I hadn't heard before. Mom says you always put the business first, and Mom says you never really understood what our family needed. I'd spent 31 years running a commercial flooring and facilities contracting business, 60-hour weeks for most of them, so my daughter could have what she needed. But somewhere in those 3 years after the divorce, Glenna had been quietly rewriting those 31 years into a different story, and my daughter had been absorbing that version like it was the original. The final break happened when my daughter was 24. She'd been seeing someone, a man she'd met through a mutual friend, and he had plans to turn a struggling food truck operation into a full sit-down restaurant. He needed startup capital. She came to me and asked me to invest. I asked questions the way any reasonable person asks questions. What's the business plan? Does he have restaurant industry experience? What's the projected timeline for return? What are the terms if the business closes? She didn't like the questions. She said I was being unsupportive, that I never believed in her choices, that this was exactly what Mom had always warned her about. That boyfriend was gone within 8 months. The silence between my daughter and me wasn't. It just stayed long after he left, like a watermark that outlasts the spill. 4 years. And now $90,000 and a Saturday night reservation. I didn't respond that first night. I lay in my bedroom at the back of my house in Plano, a house that felt 3 sizes too big, and stared at the ceiling until well past midnight. Part of me wanted to call her immediately. Part of me was afraid that if I did, she'd let it ring. Or worse, pick up and say something I couldn't unhear. But buried inside that text, underneath the price tag and the businesslike tone, were 4 words I kept returning to. We should get together. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't what I'd been waiting for. But they were the only 4 words in that whole message that weren't about money. And I held onto them the way a man holds onto anything small and warm when the room is cold. By Friday morning, I'd texted back, "I'll be there." But here's what happened between Thursday night and Saturday, because this part is important. I didn't hire anyone. I didn't want to trap my own daughter in some kind of elaborate scheme. What I wanted was simple, the same thing any reasonable parent wants, to know exactly who my daughter was planning to spend her life with. I'd spent 3 decades in commercial contracting. That business teaches you one thing above everything else. Before you sign anything, you read everything. Before you deliver material, you inspect what's in front of you. A small defect in the foundation doesn't stay small, it spreads. So I sat down at my laptop Friday morning with a cup of coffee and I looked up my daughter's fiance. She'd mentioned his name once in the brief call we'd had Friday morning to confirm the dinner, Seth. She said he was in hospitality investment and restaurant development, that he'd been involved in several successful openings across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that he was driven and well-connected. She said it, the way people talk about someone they're still in the process of convincing themselves is exactly right. His company's website looked sharp, clean design, professional photography, stylish restaurant interiors, a portfolio page listing 4 concepts he claimed to have helped develop. I spent 20 minutes cross-referencing those 4 restaurants with Texas restaurant licensing records and local news archives. 2 of them had closed within 18 months of opening. A third I couldn't locate anywhere in the state business registry. No health permit, no liquor license application, no franchise tax filing in Dallas County or Tarrant County or anywhere else I could search. In my line of work, when an inspection comes back wrong, you don't wave it off. You trace it, every number, every line, until you find where it started. I found the first civil lawsuit filed against him in Dallas County District Court. A couple from McKinney who'd invested $45,000 as silent partners in one of his restaurant ventures. The restaurant had dissolved. They'd gotten nothing back. The case had settled quietly before trial, terms undisclosed. I kept going. By Friday evening, I'd found a second lawsuit, a different investor, the same pattern. A third document, a formal complaint lodged with the Texas State Securities Board 18 months prior, still listed as under active review. I pulled the Secretary of State's business filings for his company. The registered agent address was a UPS store on a commercial strip in Addison. 3 of the partners listed on his website didn't appear in a single business filing I could find anywhere in the state. I searched their names separately. One had a LinkedIn profile with no association to his company. The other 2 didn't seem to exist at all. Not on social media, not in any professional registry, not in any public record I could access. I sat back in my chair at almost midnight in my quiet house and looked at what I had in front of me. This was not a man who'd had some bad luck in a hard industry. This was a man running a pattern, collecting investment money from people who trusted him, sheltering it inside companies that existed mainly on paper, and moving on to the next source of capital before the previous group of investors fully understood what had happened to them. And my daughter was about to marry him, and he needed $90,000. I printed every page, the lawsuits, the securities complaint, the business filings with the UPS store address, the LinkedIn discrepancies. I put it all inside a plain manila folder, the same kind I've used my whole career for subcontractor bids and inspection reports. I set it on the passenger seat of my truck and told myself, Saturday. You'll know more on Saturday. I didn't sleep much that night either. Saturday came fast. I dressed the way I always dress when something matters. Clean slacks, a dark blue button-down, the gray sport coat I've had for going on 15 years that Glenna used to say made me look like I was about to teach a driver's ed class. I didn't care. I wasn't going there to impress anyone. I was going to look at my daughter's face for the first time in 4 years, and I wanted to be steady when I did. The Meridian was in uptown Dallas, the kind of place with low lighting and a wine list that starts at $22 a glass. I'd been there maybe twice in my life, both times for business dinners I hadn't chosen. I parked on the street, sat in the truck for a moment with both hands on the wheel, picked up the folder from the passenger seat, tucked it under my arm, and walked in. I saw them before they saw me. My daughter was in a booth near the back, wearing a dress I didn't recognize, her hair longer than I remembered. 4 years changes a person. She was looking at her phone. The man beside her I recognized only from a website photo, Seth. Dark hair, tailored jacket, the kind of ease that looks like confidence until you realize it's mostly performance. He saw me first, he smiled. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile a man gives you right before he explains why what he's about to propose is actually in your best interest. My daughter looked up. You came, she said, like it was a small thing, like 4 years was a weather delay, not a choice she had made. I told you I would, I said, and I sat down. The first 10 minutes felt like a dental procedure. Seth did most of the talking. He asked about my business, called commercial flooring blue-collar work. Said it with a small smile that made clear he didn't intend it as a compliment. My daughter didn't correct him. She didn't say a single word in my defense as this man sat across from the father she hadn't spoken to in 4 years and talked down to him like he was a minor inconvenience. She just sipped her cocktail and nodded along, as if watching a stranger reduce her father over dinner. was a perfectly normal way to spend a Saturday evening. I kept my face level. I've been in enough difficult rooms to know that showing what you feel before you're ready to use it only hands the other person the advantage. After a while, my daughter set her glass down. "I think we should talk about why we're actually here," she said. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folded document, and slid it across the white tablecloth toward me like she was closing a real estate deal, a partnership agreement. My name was already printed on a signature line at the bottom. Seth leaned forward, elbows on the table, and his voice dropped into something warmer and more persuasive. "We're not asking for charity here," he said, using my first name like we were old friends, like he'd earned the right to it. "This is a legitimate investment with real upside. Quinn and I are building something serious, and we want family on the ground floor. Sign, wire the funds by Monday morning, and you get a 12% stake in the holding company." He paused for exactly one beat. "And the privilege of walking your daughter down the aisle." He said privilege like he was including a bonus feature, like my presence at my own daughter's wedding was a benefit he was generously folding into the terms. I looked at my daughter. I waited. Some part of me still believed she would say something, that she would look at me and say, "That's not how I meant this, Dad." That somewhere behind 4 years of silence was still the girl I'd taught to drive in an empty parking lot on a Sunday morning when she was 15 and terrified of the gas pedal. She looked back at me, steady and patient. "It's a solid opportunity, Dad. I've looked at the numbers." I kept my eyes on hers. Then I looked at the folder sitting on my lap out of sight below the edge of the table, then back at her. "I need your fiance to give us 5 minutes," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just the two of us, please. There's something in this folder I need to show you privately." Seth didn't move. He crossed his arms and leaned back. "Anything you want to say to Quinn, you say in front of me. We don't have secrets between us." I didn't look at him. I had made a decision the moment I walked through that door that I would not give him the satisfaction of my attention. "Quinn," I said, holding her eyes. 5 minutes, please, as your father. It isn't about the money." She glanced at Seth, then back at me, and her expression was one I recognized from her teenage years, the specific frustration she got when she thought I was creating obstacles out of nothing. "Whatever you need to say it here," she said, and her voice had gone cooler. "He's going to be my husband. We don't operate that way." I sat with that for a breath, 2 breaths. Then I reached down, picked up the folder, and set it flat in the middle of the table, right between the wine glasses and the document with my name on the signature line. "Everything you need to know about the man you're planning to marry is in that folder," I said, and my voice was as steady as I could make it. 2 civil lawsuits from investors who lost their money, an open complaint with the Texas State Securities Board, a company address that's a mailbox at a shipping store in Addison, business partners listed on his website who don't appear in any public record. I spent 2 days finding all of this. I didn't come here tonight to embarrass anyone. I came here because protecting you is the only reason I walked through that door. Nobody said anything. Somewhere behind us, the quiet sounds of the restaurant continued. Silverware, low voices, the kind of ambient noise that feels obscene when something serious is happening. I looked at Seth then, directly, and held his gaze. "I'm not signing that document. I won't be transferring a single dollar." Then I looked at my daughter one last time. 4 years ago, I asked reasonable questions about someone you wanted me to fund, and you decided that meant I didn't support you. Tonight I came back after 4 years of nothing, after 4 years of hoping you'd call, and I'm trying to hand you the truth. I hope you open that folder. I hope you read every page. Because what's inside is the only thing I have to give you tonight that's actually worth anything. I pushed back from the booth. I reached into my wallet, set 250s next to my water glass. Untouched, not a sip, stood up, and buttoned my jacket the same way I've buttoned it before every job that mattered. And I walked out, past the host stand, through the heavy front doors, into the March night air. A light rain had started while I was inside. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting it land on my face, and then I walked to my truck and drove home. I didn't feel like I'd won something. I want to say that clearly, because it would be easy to dress this up as a victory. I felt hollowed out, like something that had been slowly coming apart for 4 years had finally finished, and all that remained was the particular silence that lives on the other side of a breaking point. But underneath that, quiet, stubborn, almost ashamed to be there, I felt something else too, small but real. I had given her the truth, every page of it. What she chose to do with it wasn't mine to control anymore. The 3 days that followed were the loudest silence I have ever experienced. I mowed my lawn Sunday even though it didn't need it. I called my sister and talked about nothing in particular. I went to my regular Monday morning coffee and sat across from a contractor buddy of mine for an hour without mentioning any of it. Then Monday evening, I was in my living room with the local news on low volume when the anchor's tone shifted. That specific shift that reporters get when a story has actual weight behind it. Developing story tonight out of North Dallas, she said. State authorities have moved to freeze the assets of a local hospitality investment firm following an expanded inquiry by the Texas State Securities Board. The firm's principal faces multiple allegations of securities fraud and investor misrepresentation. Officials say the freeze was executed this afternoon following cooperation with federal financial regulators. They cut to footage, a building I recognized from Seth's company website, an official reading a statement at a podium, and then a few seconds of unsteady cell phone video, clearly shot by someone outside on the sidewalk. And at the far edge of the frame, half turned away from the camera, was a woman in a blue dress with both hands pressed over her mouth. My daughter. I turned off the television and sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt the way you feel when you watch something fall that you tried to catch and couldn't reach in time. I made myself a cup of coffee I didn't want, and I waited because I already knew what was coming. The knock on my front door came Wednesday night, a little after 9. Fast, hard, desperate. Not a polite knock, the kind that comes from someone who has been holding something together for 3 days and finally can't anymore. I opened the door. She was in jeans and a sweatshirt, no makeup, her eyes red and swollen in that way. That only happens when someone has been crying long enough that their body has nothing left and keeps going anyway. She was shaking slightly in the cool evening air. Dad? Her voice broke on the word itself. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of it. He lied to me about everything. I stood in the doorway and let her words land without rushing them. The venue canceled the contract, she said. Our joint account is frozen. His attorney isn't returning calls. Mom is. I can't. She stopped, pressed her fingers to her lips for a second. I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. I looked at her for a long moment. You opened the folder, I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. In the parking lot, right after you left. Her voice dropped. I sat in my car for almost 2 hours. Something shifted in my chest. Not quite forgiveness, not all at once, not that fast, but something. But come inside, I said. She came in. I had her sit at the kitchen table, always the same table, and I put a glass of water in front of her, and I sat across from her, and I let her talk. She talked for a long time. About Seth and how he'd explained away every concern she'd raised over 2 years. About how the accounts were never quite reconciled, and there was always a reason. About how she'd told herself she just didn't understand high-level business finance, that she needed to trust him, that her skepticism was her own insecurity showing. About how she'd been so determined not to make the same mistake she thought she'd made with me, of questioning someone she cared about, that she'd stopped questioning anything at all. I listened. I didn't say I told you so. There was nothing in that phrase worth saying. When she finally went quiet, just sitting there with both hands wrapped around the water glass, I said what I needed to say. I'll help you find a good attorney to make sure you're not legally exposed from any of this. I'll make sure you have a place to stay and food and what you need while you get back on your feet. Because you are my daughter and I love you, and that does not have an off switch. It never has, no matter what the last 4 years looked like. She looked up at me. But I need you to hear me clearly, I said. What happened to your account and your venue and your plans? That's a direct result of choices you made when you had information in front of you and chose not to look at it. And then you made choices again on Saturday when I was sitting 3 feet away from you with a folder full of the truth, and you wouldn't give me 5 minutes. I paused. I'm not telling you that to be cruel. I'm telling you because you're 30 years old, and the most useful thing I can give you right now is honesty, not a cushion. She closed her eyes. I know, she said, barely above a whisper. 4 years is a long time to lose, I said, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't hard for me, because it was. But if we're going to find our way back to each other, and I want that, I have always wanted that, it has to start from an honest place. Not dinner reservations with price tags on them. Real conversations. Real respect. Can we start there? She didn't answer right away. She looked at her water glass. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine, and neither of us said anything for a while, and that was all right. I didn't feel like I had won. There is no winning in a story like this, not really. There's only the long, slow work of figuring out what's still worth saving and being honest enough with yourself to tell the difference. My daughter slept in her old room that night, for the first time in 4 years. Before I went to bed, I stood outside the door for a moment, hand flat against the wood, The same way I'd stood there 100 times when she was small, and I just wanted to make sure she was still breathing. Some things don't change, no matter how much gets broken in between. If you've been listening, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. If any part of this story hit close to home, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. I'll see you in the next one.